Hi to everyone out there, and for something a little bit different, I'm going to be taking a quick look at this new bike I've just got. It's a Yamaha FZ25, and it's actually manufactured in India, and I guess I'm actually in Japan. There are a number of those Indian manufactured bikes that are making it to Japan by these major manufacturers, but unfortunately this is not one of them. But it's an interesting bike, and there are some local cheap bike franchises that are importing these various models from China, India and other Southeast Asian countries, and so you can get these. A little bit hard for support, etc., but still they're an interesting bike. Now this bike here, I think it sells in India probably on road for a little bit over $2,000 US, and that's pretty amazingly cheap. It's a 250cc air-cooled bike. It has ABS, it's got a digital meter, and you know it's quite well built as far as I can tell. And it also has this engine here, which is actually the same engine that's in my Sero, or Sero if I'm saying it in Japanese, which is pretty much the same. So the it's got a little bit of a difference though. Well, it's probably got a few differences. I'm sure they're tuning the ECU to be different, but they have these pipes here for the oil, and there's actually up in there, if you can see it or not, I'm not sure, an oil cooler. So I guess because in India possibly it's generally a lot hotter all of the time, I'm not really sure, I've never been there, they've decided to add this oil cooler on there as well. But you know, the Sero doesn't have it, possibly because it's more open as well, so I'm not really sure how necessary that is. You can see the ABS sensors there, and yeah, other than that, there's not a real lot to it. Now, as I said, it sells for around about $2,000 on road, $2,000 US on road in India, as far as I can tell. In Japan, it costs around about $3,000 US, and that is dirt cheap. Even though it like costs half again, which sounds like a lot, to be able to get a bike of this caliber at $3,000 is, you know, not really thought of. I mean, there's a lot of downsides. I mean, there's no support and there's a lot of other issues, but still, you know, to get something similar to this, not that there is something exactly the same, you'd probably spend another $1,500. So you'd probably be in the range of $4,500 to get a bike like this in Japan. So yeah, the price is great, and that's one of the reasons I bought it. Now, I bought this because basically I'm doing a lot more commuting inside Japan, and I really enjoy the Sero engine. It's a great engine, and it's very fuel efficient, and that's all fine and good, but it doesn't have ABS, and the wheels are not really good for a lot of commuting because, you know, it's off-road tires. So I thought this would be a good option to do a little bit more commuting inside Japan. And the fuel economy is apparently very good. I'm getting around about, right now, it's still in the running period, but it's doing about 30 kilometers per litre in town, and I expect to probably get around about 40 kilometers per litre on the highway, if I'm not going too fast, that is. So I think it's quite reasonable, and it's probably in line with what we're seeing with the Sero. Now, the new Sero I'm riding seems to be a little bit more aggressively set in the way that the engine performs. It sounds more aggressive too, which is fine, because actually I'd rather it to be a little bit more, a little less aggressive when I'm riding this for a commuter. And as I said, it's still running in, so I'm not really sure if that's going to change over time or not, or, you know, as I get a little bit more aggressive on the throttle. So right now it is what it is. Now, there are, out of the box, quite a number of things that I didn't like about this bike when it arrived. And just because I didn't like it doesn't mean that it's a bad bike. I mean, its the value for money is absolutely there. There's no doubt about that whatsoever. But, you know, I think it's important that people realize, you know, it's not all roses with these types of bikes. So the first thing is when I got the bike, I noticed immediately that it has all of these nasty fasteners. I've actually removed them, for example. Most of them are here. See if we can get a focus on that. See these fasteners? So, for example, they are located here, right where you're looking at them all of the time, and it's ugly. And also there were these nasty black caps on the suspension tops here. And these weren't polished at all, so I took those caps off and repolished those ends to make it look quite good. And all over the bike, and I haven't managed to get rid of it, all over the bike there is this writing everywhere, right? Everywhere you look, there's this yellow write. Now, it's true, you do see fault check white marks on Japanese delivered bikes as well, and even after servicing they do those white checks. But it's just everywhere. And now I spent some time actually going through and polishing off the black on all of these. I don't know if in India, if when they deliver it, they polish those off or not. I just don't know. But you know, it's something that it's just ugly, right? So you know, maybe that's a cultural thing, but for me, it's pretty nasty. And at the back here is quite an interesting area as well. So we have these bolts here, which were originally these extremely ugly bolts like this, right? And they were on the cap here, right where you look at it. So, you know, swapping all those out. And then they have, I think it must be a regulation or a law in India, where they have a bar here on the back here, and like a mesh, a grill. I'll insert a photo of it so you can have a look at it. And that thing is built like garbage, right? You just don't want it on your bike. It looks so ugly. So I've taken that off, and unfortunately these brackets will remain, but I've put a couple of nice little screw heads here. And here's another screw that I've replaced because of the absolute ugliness of the screws that they use. And a little bit more on the ugliest side, or the cheap side. You can see here they're using a piano wire for the gear lever here. Nasty. And I'm replacing that on the wheel axles. They're using the cheapest possible nuts. I mean, they are lockable nuts, so it's not the cheapest. I mean, they are safe. But on the Cero or the other Japanese bikes that I've ever had, they always have these flange nuts, and they're a bit thicker as well. So I actually bought some new flange nuts. I'm going to be putting those on. If you look at this, you can see one of the things, not only is there no flange here, which looks a bit pants, the thread also is quite a lot exposed, and it just looks ugly, right? So, ugliness, yeah. So I think I'm working generally on knocking the ugliness off of it, and the more I polish it, the better it gets. One of the things I did notice is that the welds and everything are really good on this bike, and maybe it's because India's probably been making bikes quite seriously. I think for about more than 5 years now, bikes and cars, and I think their quality control and their manufacturing skills have gotten extremely high. So from that perspective, you know, I think there's no problem with the fundamental frame. I expect the motor's going to be good. The wheels look really quite good, and yeah, overall all of the fundamentals look really solid. You know, there's other things like this horn here, which in the standard is they've got it hanging out on a bracket out here in the middle of the sky here, which is just, again, ugly, right? So I've moved it back in. I'm a little bit worried about it being affected by the heat of the manifold here, of the exhaust pipe. But oh well, if it dies, I might do something. And you'll also see here, you know, some interesting things like, you know, the way that these brake lines are run here, hanging out in the middle here, just doesn't look all that safe from a design perspective. You would normally expect those to be locked down. So that's that. And then finally, probably complaint about the bike is the way that the muffler sits. It sits quite a long way out. You know, I think they could have done a little bit more to have it sit a bit more in, or make it a bit more narrow and longer or something, but it's just so far out from the side of the bike. You know, you're going to whack it on everything. So now you could go and put a custom muffler on it, which obviously in Japan I'm not going to find one. But you know, I don't like to do it all that much because it changes the behavior of the bike, and you know, the ECUs are generally tuned for, you know, with these mufflers on. So yeah, it's a bit of a concern as to how to deal with that. You'll also notice under here they've got a catalytic converter down here as well, which is amazing, really. I mean, catalytic converter on a 250cc bike. You don't see that. I guess that's where the direction of the regulations as they're going to go. Now I'm going to do a few things to this bike from now on. As I said, I've already done a few. I've replaced a few of the bolts. I'm going to put a heat grip on it, and I'm going to put a USB 2 amp power connection, and I also am going to put electronic toll collection unit in the system, and I'm going to swap out these blinkers, or winkers as they're called in Japan, because they're a little bit horrendous, and they're not LED. This is a projected LED lamp for the main light here, and the position light here is also LED. It's interesting, this position lamp, actually, when you turn the main light on, the position lamp goes dim. So you know, they really put some thought into that. And on the rear here, as I said, I've already removed the Sally bar. They call it the Sally bar, I guess, because it's to stop Sally's dress from getting inside the wheel. Not really sure about that. But on the back here, LED brake and park light, or whatever you want to call it. And again, this here, this monstrosity at the back here with these weird little wings. I don't know what's going on with that. So I'm going to get rid of that, and I'm going to go to a fenderless arrangement, which is, well, a mini fender, which will pull the plate and everything back up under there and make the bike a little bit shorter, because right now it's really hanging out there, and these things hang out here when you're on a commuter bike. When you're parking and moving around, you're going to bash it into things, it's going to bend it, you're going to break it, so just better to get rid of it altogether. Have a look at the utility of the bike here. It's got a pretty nice meter, it's simple. A lot of people complain, I think the Indians complain that this is a bit too simple, but for the price I don't think you can fault it. There's nothing wrong with it. It's got all the information. It's got trip, dual trip, time, fuel, etc. And I think in India there's this fad for USB, for Bluetooth connectivity or something like that, but you know, personally I just don't care. I guess if you had it, fine. If you don't, you don't. I mean, Bluetooth connectivity for these types of bikes and things like that is a double-edged sword, because you're really dependent on the app hanging around for long enough into the future. For this, you don't have any dependencies. It's going to go pretty much forever as long as the electronics keep working. And I'll kick the engine on just so you can have a listen to it. So when it starts up, it's idling around about 2000 RPM, and then it drops down to around about 1400 or 1200 once it warms up. So I think that's fine. And which the last thing I'll show you guys is this little seat compartment. This seat arrangement, the pillion seat, is really nice, as far as it's quite comfortable. The main seat also quite comfortable. Overall it's a little bit high, but I think for my size, I'm about 180 centimeters. Well, my wife thinks I'm a little bit shorter, but I reckon I'm 180 centimeters, and I find this to be quite comfortable. Different to after riding this for a little while, you know, I found that the position is quite a lot more forward, and the handlebars are quite narrow compared to the Cero, naturally. But I've been riding this for a couple of weeks now, and I rode my Cero yesterday, and the first thing I noticed was that my legs were like crunched up around my chest when I'm riding the Cero. So clearly these pegs are a lot lower, and the whole position of this bike is a lot more relaxed for commuting, and I think that's great actually. Okay, and on the pillion here, as I said, really good arrangement. These big handles for the pillion rider, and a nice side seat for a small bike, and comfortable and different. Normally a lot of these bikes you pop off the seat from the back. This pops off from the front and you pull it forward. And they have a card-based electronic toll system here in Japan, so I'll be putting that unit in here. But it's got a little bit of space, not really a lot, but yeah, not too bad. And a little tool arrangement, which is nice. Now they also apparently in the manual it says you meant to have a first aid kit. Now that's quite interesting. I mean, obviously this is another cultural local issue. It must be law or something that, or you know, maybe there's something happened that they decided to put it. But basically in India, this bike will have a first aid kit inside it, which is interesting. On the point of things missing when I live it, I also noticed the manual when I got it. I was having a bit of a flip through here, and I noticed that there's a bunch of pages missing. See here, 4, 5. Oh yeah, something missing. You can see it's been torn out. Right. So what's happened here is when it's arrived here in the country, they've ripped out the first aid kit, and they've ripped out these first 3 pages of service information. And the reason is because I if I understand correctly, the first 3 services are probably free in India, which is pretty cool. So you get quite a lot of bang for your buck when you're in India with these bikes. And something else that was missing on this bike was there's meant to be a little bracket on the front here. Now, to be honest, I don't want the bracket, but in India they have to have the license plate on the front as well, which is extremely pants. I hate license plates on the front of the bike. It's the most ugly and stupidest thing in the world. So thankfully in Japan we don't have to do that. But unfortunately these remain, and again these screws are a little bit on the ugly side, so I might see if I can, they're not too bad, but I might see if I can do something a little bit better with that as well. And the final complaint about the bike would be the mirrors. Now, these grips are 130 centimeter grips. Now, in Japan, all the bikes I've ever ridden are 120. So this is going to push the whole sort of this cluster assembly here in a little bit, and that pushes the mirror in a bit. And then the width of the handlebars also is quite narrow. So what you end up having is the mirror is quite a long way in. It's nearly like a cowled bike as far as the positioning goes. And these are not the original mirrors, because the original mirrors are actually reverse shaped. They have the big part on the back here and the small part on the outside, which means you can see basically nothing. And they're also extremely ugly. So I definitely got rid of those pretty quickly. And I had these, which was actually I had them on my Grom at one stage when I had a Grom, and I'm just reusing those. But these mirrors work all right. But I still can only see really half of anything, so yeah, not great. But I think unless you go to a wider handlebar or go to a smaller grip or something to really shift everything out a little bit, you're probably not gonna. I mean, I guess you could get a longer mirror arm or something like that. But there's not a lot of standard stuff out there that's going to work on the bike straight away. Alright, I think I pretty much covered everything here for now. I'm going to get on to doing the customization. So I got you back here now. All the main covers are off. They all went relatively smoothly. There's a couple of videos on YouTube that you can find to help you pull things apart, including getting this tank cover off, which is a little bit tricky, but not so bad. The video that I watched showed that you need to remove the cap, which I did do. I don't think you need to remove the cap to remove this cover. I think it's going to sit on there anyway. Maybe I'm a bit confused about what he was talking about. I'm not sure. And overall, I remain still pretty impressed with this bike. It's pretty complex. I mean, there's a ton of stuff in here. When you look at it, I'm not sure if you really want things to be this complicated, but it is. There's heaps in there, and I can identify most of the stuff. I mean, some of it I'd probably have to follow through, but up in here we have the relay for the blinking of the blinkers or the winkers, and the voltage regulator, probably for charging, and the back here we have the starter relay, and so on. I think it's all pretty straightforward, and there was probably nothing. There's a few little things that sort of catch my eye, like these weird white cable ties in a few places which stink of afterthought or something else. Again, we're seeing they're using these very nasty cheap plastic removable ties, which are also on the handlebars, and this whatever, that's not too bad. But there's a few things here. For example, this is where the cover sits down on here, and it sits on these little spigots here, which are plastic edge, and there's two, one here and one here, but you'll notice that this one is missing the cover, and there was a little bit of a vibration, like a cowling vibration that I heard when I was accelerating, so I suspect that this is just never been installed. So even though they've got little yellow dots on everything, unfortunately they managed to miss this one. I guess that's why they have those yellow dots. But you can see this cable here is sitting right against where this would be, so I don't think it's fallen off. I think they just never installed it. But that's okay, because when I removed the cowling here on the front, this fell out. I don't know if it's from anything in here or if it's just whatever, but be rest assured it has a little paint dot on it, so I guess that means everything's okay. Ah dear. Alright, so and probably of notable and my concern or annoyance is there's quite a bit of rust on this specific cylinder head bolt. It seems to be some sort of reaction in the metals between these two different metal types. It's a bit nasty, so I'm going to have to clean that up. And I also noticed on the fuel tank side as well, there's a bit of sort of that corrosion sort of metal difference or something. That's, you know, I often find that these look like that, so it's not probably something specific to this manufacturing technique. And once again, we can have a bit of a look at these worlds. You know, really well built. You know, plenty of strength in this frame, that's for sure. And the worlds are really quite nice. So, you know, as I said before, I think you can see that the build quality in general is on the high side, I'd say. Yeah, pretty satisfied with that. So, next up, I need to get into a few things and get this electronics done. The main loom seems to be running down here and under the tank here, and everything is pretty accessible. They seem to be threading it back through and under and down under there, so I think it's not going to be a big issue to get cables in and out. I add a few extra looms on here, so yeah, we'll get to it. So I've got these grips off here, ready to get the heated grips on. And getting the grips off is not so difficult. On this side, obviously, it's the fixed side. So what I usually do is I'll get myself a flathead screwdriver and wedge it in there and start push it up. And I've got this wonderful Honda. It's actually for removing grips. Actually, I don't know what it is. Some sort of liquid that removes the grips, or some sort of solvent. And the good thing is you can get that minus driver and you can slowly work this in and keep spraying, and it loosens up all of that glue. And as you're doing that, you can sort of roll the minus driver around, and that will loosen it up. Keep spraying a bit of this in here as you go, and then eventually it'll just pop off. So that's pretty straightforward. And on the other side, I've actually done one of these before with the Honda Sports heated grip. And normally the Honda Sports heated grip comes with the throttle wire assembly and everything as one piece. But the one that I purchased, which is a Kijima kit, it doesn't have that piece. And so I was a little bit stuck, to be honest, because this is actually a 130mm throttle body here, and most of them in Japan are 120. So, and I don't know the part number or anything like that for this. So this is actually a little bit longer, and you can see it's about 10mm short here. So originally I was thinking about just extending this a little bit, but I don't think it's going to matter, to be honest, if this little piece is not actually supported. And the heated grip itself, if we have a look at this big one here, it's actually it's plastic all the way through, so it's going to support itself in any case. And the great thing about this is that this looks like Yamaha is using this standard throttle body on nearly all of their bikes. Even the extremely cheap bikes like, I don't know, like Cygnus or something like that. So this 120mm throttle body is a really standard part, and it costs around about $2. So that was a bit of a save there. And yeah, the actual throttle structure here is identical that I've got. And I actually ended up buying two of these because it's just so cheap. And so YZF Arni R25, it's a bit Japanese, and probably Cero and Trika and all those bikes, and Cygnus probably all use the same throttle body, so it's pretty straightforward. So at first I was thinking of returning these because it didn't have I expected it to have the throttle wire linkage on there, but it didn't, so I thought I was pretty buggered and I was going to return it, and then I found this, and that sort of saved the day. So yeah, that's where I do with that. I'll put some glue on there and we'll get these on there in a minute, and we'll be up for the next. So I've just popped the throttle off here again, and that's because I managed to glue the grip to the throttle housing when I pushed it on, and that's not surprising. So basically there was some glue all around the inside here locking the throttle up in, so I just took that apart and scraped all that off, and all that's fine. I'm using this this glue here, which is recommended by the maker of the grip, and apparently it says on there that it hardens up in around about 25 seconds, but I think it took about 10 minutes in any case. Anyways, you had plenty of time to sort of move it around and get it in position. Here is the old and the new throttle. So this is, on my thumb here, is the heated grip one, and pretty similar size, so I think that's going to be fine. And you can see here that the distance in the final fit is pretty similar as well, and all of the linkage connections here are exactly the same. So, well, it's a Yamaha part, so you know it's probably going to be the same, even though it's not the actual exact model for this model. Now you can see in the old one here that the housing goes right up to the end of the rubber grip, but on this one here, see if we can get a little bit more light for you guys. On this one here, you can see it's a little bit short in there, so it is actually about one, as you would expect, about 1 centimeter short. But I don't think it's going to be a big issue. I mean, the only real concern is that some dirt manages to skip around in under the bar end and you know something jams it up. But I think the likelihood of that is zero. And the bar ends, once they're on, you really don't see any of that in any case. So yeah, I think it's a good result. So I'm going to pop that back on there, and we'll be back in business. So I've cleaned up that head bolt here, as you can see, and the bracket. And the bracket had a lot of corrosion. It was really deep down in there. Still a little bit pitted, but I managed to use a file actually and some sandpaper and get it back. I also had to pop that bolt out, and that bolt didn't seem to be torqued properly either, so that's a bit concerning. So anyway, popped the bolt out and also used a wire brush wheel on that bolt to clean the head off and get all the rust off, and treated it all with WD-40 to try to slow down the reoccurrence of it. It looks pretty good. And yes, I did correctly torque down to the correct torque for the head bolt as well. You know, I prefer not to have removed it, but the corrosion was really quite bad, so it's a matter of selecting the worst option, I guess. But I didn't run the motor or anything like that with the head bolt out, so I don't think it's going to make a lot of difference. And I did check the tension on the other head bolts as well, and they seemed okay, so that seems alright. And I also, on this other side here, cleaned up that corrosion under here, as you can see. That's looking pretty good. Now the progress on the wiring is going pretty good. I've got this handle grip back on here, and you can see the wire for that handle grip is sort of neatly tucked into that bunch. I also have this little indicator, which you can just see there. That's for the electronic toll collection system, and all of that sort of neatly fits down in there. The wiring is quite... I'm going to run the wiring all into this headlight block, which is what they're originally doing in any case. This side was already chock-a-block with cables and wires going into this section as well, but now I've added that I've added the USB 2 amp power socket there as well, and obviously we have the grip heater controller, which is another pretty thick wire, and we have the wire for the grip as well. So that's all going in there, and basically bring it into here, into this block. Here is the antenna for the electronic control system, electronic toll collection system, which I'll make a little bracket mount there so that it sits up there under that plastic cover somewhere in here. But anyway, so once I've got all those cables in here, I can connect the heat grip harness up. So I finished up that wire loom, and I'll just give you a look at what it looks like and where it goes so you can have it for your reference. So the main loom exits here, and then I'm basically following the original loom. I'm just tying up here on this cable restraint. This box here is the USB power box. This is the inverter or whatever it is. It's quite unfortunate, but it's hardwired into this cable, and the position you can't really change, so it is where it is. But I managed to restrain it quite well under this tank bracket here. And then the loom heads on along the back here and under there and up towards the back here. And I've placed all of the relay and everything inside here, and I've just restrained the capacitor here on the side here, and the fuse coming in for the power to power the relay and power the electronic toll collection system, as I'm sharing the fuse for that, is down there, right? And this is where all of the rear lights connectors are, so I'll be just doubling off that, pinching off that, splitting the power for the light for the number plate light. And I have the two fuses here, one for the heated grip and the other one for the USB power, so I can access those from this rear seat if one of those fail. So I have independent fuses for each of those, and then here is the cables for the electronic toll collection main unit where you put your card in case you've never seen one of these. Sure, if you're from Japan you have. It's just like a credit card or an IC card that goes in there. And the incoming power loom, I'm taking positive and negative directly from the battery here. So here is the positive, the negative terminal, and the positive terminal. And the positive terminal goes directly into a main feed fuse, and then the loom just sneaks up behind this main loom here, and I'm not sure if we can see it. Yeah, this line here, going up and into the relay. So that's it. So next up, I'll be working on this fenderless arrangement and the LED blinkers, winkers, or indicators, or whatever you want to call them. Oh, you can just turn this on as well, just to see that everything works. So you can see the heater grip sort of powers up straight away. Turn that off. Don't want my battery to go. The USB, I already connected, I already tested it, and it powers up no problem. Just got this little cover on there. So you can sort of, you get the point. And this is the indicator for the electronic toll collection. The card's not in there, it'll go green when the card's in there. So this is a circuit diagram that I used for the R25's modification of the accessory circuit. So the main circuit up here, you can see the accessory voltage is coming in. This fuse here, I can actually reduce that to about 1 amp, it doesn't need to be this big. But in any case, I'm having a common usage of this fuse to feed the electronic toll collection. And then I take directly plus and minus from the battery. You know, I could get the minus from the chassis, I guess, but you know, I just feel comfortable running the wire. So plus and minus, the plus goes through a relatively large fuse, and then through the relays contacts here. I also have a bit of a protection diode here to stop any back EMF, not so critical for a motorbike, I suspect. And then on the output side of the relay here, I just have two capacitors, a 1000 microfarad and 0.1 microfarad capacitor, just to stop any garbage from propagating back to the system. And it's probably unlikely it's going to propagate back because it goes directly to the battery terminals, which is going to be as heavy as it gets as far as holding the voltage goes. So possibly unnecessary, but just you know, makes me feel comfortable, and that's good enough, I guess. So yeah, the diode and the capacitor is probably quite unnecessary, I think, but still makes me feel comfortable, so that's the way it is. And for the R25, I just connected the USB charger and the grip heater to the original accessory lines, and the net result is that I needed a fuse somewhere as well. So this is basically depending upon this common fuse back here to protect any of this, which is probably not great, to be quite honest. So in the new version, or on the version that I'm doing on this FZ25, I'm actually adding fuses to the USB line and the grip heater line individually, so 5 amps each. So, and then I still have a battery main fuse as well. So I think the R25 was really under some space pressures, so I didn't add it, but in hindsight I probably should have added it. Again, with the fuse for the ETC, I'm sharing this fuse for the relay with the electronic toll collection. To be honest, the ETC electronic toll collection probably should have its own fuse as well and go directly to the accessory power. But this harness on the R25 finishes with this 5 amp fuse, so that would mean I'd probably need to add another 2 fuses here, and it just seems like another space issue. So even for the FZ25, this time I have not added additional fuses here, though I was tempted to just run the ETC directly to the accessory power. And when I say accessory power in the case of the FZ25, I'm actually just using the indicator light, or the light that's used for the number plate, because that's constantly on, and it seems to be going wire-wise directly to the to pretty much the source power in the bike when I look at the circuit diagram. So the way the indicator works on this FZ is pretty much the way the indicators work on most bikes, most classic bikes, we'll say. So what we have is a flasher relay, which looks something like this. It's like a bimetal relay, and it's very, very simple. So here's the relay. And what happens is when current flows through, it has two different types of metals on either side of the switch contact. And as the current flows through, this contact will heat up. But it's a bimetal contact, if I understand correctly. And so one side will heat quicker than the other side, causing this to like banana. Like this, something like that, say for example. And so this bananaing means that we'll lose contact. So at a certain current rate, ran for a certain amount of time, this will banana up, and after it cools down, it will flick back. And so this sort of just keeps repeating. Banana repeat, banana repeat, banana repeat, banana repeat. And that's what flashing is. And so there's only one flash. It's not like a flasher for every single light on the bike. There's only one common flasher unit, and it will go to the battery plus volts, right? And then we will go to a selector switch, which is a button you press on your bike. We can say it's a 3-position switch, and when you press the button, you either go left or right. And then this goes off to your light bulbs. One for the rear, one for the front, and that's obviously going to the battery minus. So that's it, right? And something else to note is that there will be usually 2 lead-offs here, which go to the dashboard. So this goes to the dashboard indicator, and that's the flashing you see on the dashboard, right? So the key point is that I want to say is that with these bulb style indicators, they don't have any resistors or anything like that. They run at a certain current. You put a certain voltage, you get a certain current. And if you have 2 in line, obviously it's going to be double that current. So in any case, this relay is basically tuned to be able to operate with 2 of these normal incandescent light bulbs. And if you go and change the amount of current that's running through here, you know, if the current's more, then obviously it's going to heat up quicker and flash faster. If the current's less, then it's going to flash slower. And you quite often see that if you lose one of these light bulbs, if it blows, you will get a slow flash. And that's because this is now heating up at half the speed, and you're getting pretty much close to half the flashing rate. So it's as simple as that. So I think the thing I wanted to say is not that you can't just go and swap in an LED or an LED array into here. It doesn't work that simple. In fact, whatever we do here needs to be tuned to maintain this flashing speed. Alternatively, there's a lot of IC relays as well. And if you swap in the IC relay into here, then that's probably going to work. I think they're pretty cool how they work. I mean, you only have a plus and a negative. I guess they must do some internal pulse charging or something like that to get an internal voltage to operate at. Okay, so moving on to the fenderless kit and the indicator upgrade. This is the original indicators that are on the FZ25. Oh god, look at this. More of this garbage writing. It's literally on every single part of the bike. And the thing about this pen that they're using as well is that I can't actually figure out a good solvent. I mean, I've used different types of solvents, 2 different types of paint solvents, alcohol, all sorts of stuff, and I can't get this stuff off. It's like on there forever, so yeah, thanks very much for that. Oh, look at that. You can check here, there's quite a lot of, all of the chrome has already fallen off, or never actually been on the inside of this indicator. That's all pretty nasty. Yeah, anyway, whatever. So yeah, these are the original indicators. And here are a couple of, I had these indicators on hand. They're from a Grom which I sold a few years ago. I was thinking to reuse those. I think a little bit small, but I think they're alright. I like this smoke look. So I thought I was going to reuse those, but after closer inspection I found that yeah, I think it's not so healthy. There's a nice crack in there as well. So yeah, I think these are well past their use by date. Something nasty anyway. And additionally, the other thing is that the indicator, the rear brake and park light, or whatever you want to call it, It's also using a clear lens as well, so it's not really a good match. You can see the original looks pretty good with that, right? So, you know, I bit the bullet and I went and purchased some new indicators. Let me get that out of the way for a second. What am I doing here? Here we go. So these are the new indicators that I purchased. I think it cost me around about, God, how much was it? I think it was about $30 for a set of 4. It's not too bad. And yeah, they look pretty good, right? I think. And also the mount is this nice big mount, which is going to be pretty good equivalent to sort of cover up the big hole that you'll get after taking that off. And these mounts also have a 10mm threaded pipe here, but it also has a keyed mount here as well, so that will help stop it from rotating around, assuming I can get it to lock in place quite well. So the 3 indicators that I had here, I did do a quick current measurement on them, and this one here was 30 milliamps at 12 volts, and this is around about the normal incandescent bulb is around about 750 milliamps, and this indicator is around about 150 milliamps. So this is pretty bright. Actually, it's well on par with the incandescent, and actually this is really too dark. So I think this is garbage, and we'll just forget about that. So yeah, and that's the one we're going to go with. It's pretty nice. Now for the front indicators, you can see from the photo I'll put on the screen now. After removing the old indicator, you get a pretty big hole and not really any good way to mount it. I had a few bits of hardware left over from my Grom, which is these plastic things. So I thought I could possibly reuse those. And what I did is I 3D printed up these little inserts to put into that hole, and these are really a perfect fit. Now, unfortunately, these things took me so long to make. I mean, I printed them out. I printed a pair out maybe 6 times, and I couldn't figure out why I couldn't get them to fit. It's such a stupid thing. So the shaft is like 10 millimeters, right? And so I had envisaged that the shaft was 10 millimeters and they just shifted the width with a straight line, and that's the way I was designing it. But, you know, it's not. I mean, I just had convinced myself that was the case. And of course, this is actually just a larger circle, which has got the sides cut out of it. So naturally, every time I printed it, I couldn't get it to fit on, and ended up printing a lot. And combined with that, my Fusion 360 stopped running on one of my PCs, which was making matters a lot worse. So I wasted nearly a whole day messing around with printing these 2 little plastic inserts. Anyway, they fit good now. So the idea is that I'll probably just hot glue this on the back here as well, just to make sure that it sits. And then the washer and a nut. So I think you get the idea. That should provide a good positive and directional mount. And with that, you can see that closes up pretty good there, right? And that will actually give some good pressure on there and hold it tight in place. And that can't rotate anymore because it's keyed in. And this can sort of spin around here, but as I said, I'll just hot glue that onto the back here to make sure it doesn't move around much when I'm putting in place. And once it's screwed in place, it's going to be fine anyway. So that's the way I'll mount the front ones. You can see the old and the new. So yeah, that worked out pretty good after wasting so much time. Now I used, you can see I'm using a burgundy coloured, it's a PLA 3D printed part. And I'm using the burgundy because I had black, but my black filament was playing up. I think it's getting old, so it's bubbling and lifting and doing all sorts of nasty stuff. And this is printed out, no problems at all. So this filament's working well. In any case, you can't see it because it's inside the body, so it doesn't matter what colour it is. And on these indicators as well, they're meant to be somewhat waterproof, but and inside, on the front, these will be inside the cowl, so it doesn't really matter, but this big hole here gives me some doubt. So what I'll do is I'll shove a bit of hot glue down all of these just to make sure that they seal up a little bit better. Now the reason I didn't just print this as one big piece is because the PLA, even though it's pretty strong, it does have a tendency to be affected by temperature a little bit. So it would under load and under temperature start to distort. So this piece of probably ABS or something quite harder is probably more tolerant to temperature. And with the washer on here, it'll also reinforce it. So, I mean, it's a little bit of a gamble using the PLA in this spot, but my experience with PLA has been it does seem to maintain its strength over time. And I just wanted to point out that I'm using it says in Japanese LED indicator relay. So I purchased this off Amazon for about, I think it's about $4 US. It's got a good, trustworthy brand, Mad Max. I'm sure that's going to really set the scene for us. But it was a pretty simple direct plug-in replacement. This is actually the one that is originally on the FZ25, and I've just plugged the new one in. So anyway, if you try to use the original relay, obviously it's not going to work because they're designed around using a larger amount of current, and obviously they're using a thermal mechanical type switch, so it's dependent on the current to adjust the switch timing. So if you just ran, so yeah, these are expecting to have 10 watts times 2, so plus 3.4 watts. So the 10 watts by 2 is either the left or the right hand side indicators running at the same time, so 2 indicators, and the 3.4 watt would be the dashboard indicator. So it's assuming this amount of load will be running through it, and that will be what drives the timing. So obviously the new indicators are only about 1.5 watts, so instead of 20 watts, it's only 3 watts. So the net result is the heating on the thermoactivated switch will be slower, and so forth. The switching will be a lot slower. So these are quite useless. It's quite an ingenious design, but unfortunately no good for LED type. So I'm not really sure how they solve it with these solid state type relays with only 2 pins, because there's no earth. They must be using some sort of charge pump or something in there to create a internal voltage to then run some type of oscillator and a switch. But to be honest, I don't want to think about it. I don't care. It's going to hopefully work. If it doesn't work, I'll figure out a different solution. So there you have it. So let's talk about the fenderless kit next. I bought this FZ07 fenderless kit. This is obviously an FZ25, an Indian model, so there's obviously nothing available in Japan, and I didn't actually see anything online in India. I guess there might be, but I didn't see a good fenderless kit available. So I saw the photo of this and I thought I could make it work, and I was going to try and make it work. I mean, I knew I needed to modify it. The original mount, this is the original fender, this monstrosity, which I'm not even going to get on the shot. So the mount looks somewhat like this, but the mount on the fenderless kit that I got actually included the screws with these wings that were sitting on the side here of the fenderless kit. Either one way or the other. It's probably the other way around, I suspect. I'm not really sure. Probably like that. So these were a part of the unit. So I've chopped these off and I've filed this down so that the height internally here is about 13.2 millimeters. And that's because if you have a look at the photo here, which I'll put on screen, there's a lot of protrusions and things down here which have to have some space. So in the original design, obviously they have this big gap in the middle here, which works fine. And obviously this has a big gap in the middle too, but you need to have enough height to clear those internal structures. Unfortunately, the way this mounts on the bike is that the plastic bodywork sort of sits around here, and then there's a spacer so that it can skip past the plastic bodywork and mount directly to the metal frame of the bike. So I need to be able to replicate that, so I've drilled these holes, and as you see they're extremely close because they're not, this is a little bit too narrow is what I would say. And these spaces need to sit like on top of here. But there's, you know, obviously that's not going to be very stable, and there's this big hole here which is going to let dirt and garbage to get up into the bike as well. Not that this original design was so great. So I think I needed to design something which replicated this sort of shape and stopped getting dirt in, whilst avoiding all the protrusions on the structure of the bodywork of the bike itself. So what I did is I 3D printed out this little insert, and it's also PLA. So again, I'm running a bit of a risk, but I'm hopeful. And this is the black PLA which was playing up, and it was all sort of bubbling and going really rotten on me. So this section here, which is external, which in theory you could see, but actually you can't really see, it's more functional. I've actually got a file and some sandpaper, and I've just cleaned all that up a little bit. And surprisingly, for the first time I've actually tried to finish and file and polish PLA, you can actually do quite well. By using a file, you actually create a lot of friction, and that actually will melt. So filing works quite well, and it actually melts, and it filled in most of these little holes and pits from the bubbles. And I didn't lose much material in sorting it out. So this insert here fits. Let me get this paperwork out of the way. It's a pretty meaningless piece of document. This fits down in here, like that. Oh my god, that's good, isn't it? Look at that. You got to be impressed. It just looks like I bought one. But this actually matches up with the original bodywork shape, or the original fender shape. And this is also very similar to the internal shape here. I did make one mistake. This is actually I did this in one print, which is a miracle, considering that I spent 6 times I printed this to get this right, but I managed to get this on the first print, even though the surface was problematic. The only problem I had was there was a little bit of body work which is angular here, so I just notched that out with a cutter knife. So after chopping that down, it fitted no problem, so I'm pretty happy with that. The back side here I didn't even bother finishing, because you can't really see it in any case, but it does the job of sealing this gap here, and the bodywork sort of fits in that, so it should stop a bulk of the moisture and dirt and stuff trying to enter into the bike itself. Obviously there is the hole for the cable here, but that was on the original fender kit in any case, so it's not really mattering that much, I think. So that's it. Looks pretty nice, right? And while we're on 3D printing bits and pieces, I also had these body mount, I'm not sure what to call them, parts, these rubber parts that were on the bike. And I think if you remember earlier I showed you one of them was actually missing, and they're flexible rubber parts. So I went ahead and 3D printed out of, God, what is it? I can't remember now. TPU, right? This, which is also somewhat flexible and quite strong actually. You will never break that. But yeah, this also was a pretty successful print. You can see the way that when it prints in a circle like this, it creates some tension and pulls this edge in a little bit. There's really not too much you can do about that. That's just the nature of printing with flexible materials in this method. But it's definitely going to do the job. I put it on the bike and give it a go, and it looks really good. In fact, I printed out a couple of spares. This is the first one I printed here, which is using a random scene, which is why you see these little retract dots where the nozzle retracts before it moves to the next layer. And then I changed the print setting so that it calls the seam to be all in the same location, which is probably... God, I can't even find the seam. That's impressive. I think it must be here, the seam here, which is quite nice because you can't see it. I printed a few spares because probably when you pop the body parts off, it probably pulls these off and you lose them, which is why it's missing, I suspect. Anyway, back to this fenderless kit. Let's talk about what I had to modify other than cutting off this to get this to work. The indicator holes here I filed out, and I made a bit of a mess of them actually, to be honest, so such is life, but in any case I had to file out that shape to make sure that they fit. And another thing is there is this reflector kit. The reflector fits on the bottom here, like this. Originally there is just these two holes here to fit the reflector kit, and that sort of means you have an adjustability like this, but not only is it adjustable, it's sort of like going to flap around a bit there as well. It's a bit of a stupid design, I think, if you ask me. So I don't really like that. So and also the other thing is that the adjustability only means you can go up to that height, and given the number plate's going to finish around about here, it's going to be hanging down there in the breeze, so that's pretty ugly. So I've drilled 2 new holes here, and I made it so you can mount it as high as possible. Just below the number plate is where the reflector will be, and also drilled a hole here for the cable for the number plate light. And by coincidence, the number plate light bolts actually will just fit through there, so everything sort of lines up nicely. And that's all I really had to do. And other than that, the angle of the indicators and the angle of the plate, the positioning and the fit of filling a hole is really, it's just about as perfect as you're going to get it for this. So I'm really happy with this this solution for the fenderless kit. Oh, and just so you can see, this is where these spaces have to go up here. And while we're talking about those screws, there's a lot of hardware that's actually supplied with the original fenderless kit. I'm using some of it, but not all of it. There's a bag around here which I can't seem to find. But in any case, the original bolts that they provided are these bolts, which are going to be too short by the time you get the spacer on there. And then the body, yeah, it's not going to work. So I ordered some different screws, some new stainless steel screws, and I'm using these cap screws again, like the same brand, slightly smaller than the ones that I'm using on the handlebar, but they will fit. They look about 1,000 times better, and they're obviously going to be less protruding, which is going to be nice. And they're a little bit long actually. I might chop them down, but I may also use this extended bolt part to help mount the electronic toll collection unit as well. But we'll see how that goes. If I need to cut them down, I'll cut them down. But it's better to be a bit long than a bit short. So I've got that all completed and on there now. It looks pretty good. This back cover's worked out quite nice. You can see it hangs out just a little bit, but I think it doesn't matter. And they're quite rigid on there. I don't think they're going to go anywhere. It's probably about as rigid as I've ever had these custom indicators. It's hard to get this all on one screen, but yeah, you get the idea. And I've added a few cable ties here on the back here to just to keep it all sort of from hanging above or getting in the way or looking ugly. There we go. You can see the hot glue here, but I think it doesn't really matter. You can't really see it much. I think it looks alright. So get that on there. I think it's going to be pretty easy to fit. Just pop it straight on, just like the original. Right? Looks really good. Alright, on to the next step. So just a quick look at what that insert looks like before I put the indicator on. You can see, or you can't see. That's where the back cap will go, so pretty tight fit, but I think it's going to work out pretty good. Let's get the indicator on there then. Obviously the other side is the same too. So I finished all the wire for the rear fender. You can see these bolts are sitting a little bit proud, so I think hopefully with any luck I'll be able to make use of those to make some sort of bracket plate or something to mount this electronic toll collection system, but yet to be seen. You can see the fuse for the accessory relay, which is over here, fitting in from the light here. It's taking the power from the number plate light. You can see the little splitter inside there to split that off. So everything's inside that boot there nicely. That's the original boot, and the cables are pretty much in the original. I've got the computer and the test lead out of the way at the moment so you can see it. But yeah, everything fits pretty nicely. If you have a look underneath here, looks pretty good and nice and neat under here. And this just fits perfectly, this light here for the number plate. You can see it's like Perfect. So I really quite like it. Still haven't finished putting everything back together yet, but before I close it up, give you a look. And the front here, nothing special here. The indicators come out, and the leads are just here. It's the original leads. Originally, when I first plugged it in, I don't know, there was some confusion. They weren't working, but I disconnected and reconnected, and everything seemed to work okay. So just give them a run. Well, that's a relief. You can see they're pretty bright. That number plate light's pretty bright too. And the dashboard indicator is of course working. Flip to the right. And of course we have the right. And the brake obviously works no problem as well. So now it's time to get the body back on and clean things up. The last thing I really have to figure out is how to mount the electronic toll collection unit. And just a little sub issue, which not really an issue but an interesting thing that you can comment on the comment, is this extremely long front fender at the back here. Now the original, when they first released this bike, the version 1 of this bike, I think it's version 1, it was a short fender, but they've changed this to a long fender, and they've added this undercowl here. Now the undercowl looks pretty good, I like that. This long fender is a bit dodgy, so I'm contemplating trimming it off actually. Obviously I could buy the one from the older version. That's going to cost a lot of money I expect, so trim it off or leave it as it is. Now there's a good benefit for having it long. Obviously none of the garbage is going to get up into the engine or onto the manifold exhaust pipe there. So I don't know, I'm on the fence. What do you reckon, guys? Should I chop it off? Well, it doesn't really matter what you say, I'll probably do whatever I want anyway, but I'd be interested in your point of view. I think it doesn't look too bad. On the fence. Alright, let's get it back together. Sorry, I got you back here for a second just to give you a look at this. This is the flasher relay for LED style indicators. And it's just a 2-wire, so it's pretty cool that they can do it with that. But the orientation of the pins is a little bit different. This is the original one here. And it's also just a little bit bigger. And the rubber mount that comes with it is for vertical mounting, whereas this has got the 90-degree twist size. This is from the original rubber mount that I'm just reusing. And another little issue I had was that the wires and the connector for the number plate indicator, the socket connector, is too small. So yeah, this is a normal size connector, which obviously these connectors are all set for. And this is the one that was on the number plate illuminator. You can see it's about a couple of mil or so small. Anyway, it's not big enough to put in the existing socket, so I had to chop off this wire, obviously, and I just had a couple of these leads kicking around, so I tacked them on and solved the problem. But yeah, anyway. So I've decided to put the antenna for the electronic toll collection unit in here, and I just made this little aluminium bracket which sort of wedges up against the back of the meter there. I don't know if you can see that very well. So yeah, just wedge it in there, and using one of the screws, that's pretty solid. And I'll just put some some strong double-sided tape here to get the antenna there, be inside the cowl, which is nice. Don't want it sitting on the outside, it's too ugly. So I'll stick it on there now. So I've been wrestling with this wiring for a little while now to get this cowling back on. It's so tight in here because I've added those extra cables for the heat grip and those extra connectors. And they really don't give you much space in here, but you know, you just got to keep fiddling around until it sort of sits flat. And I'll get that rubber sheath in there. So it does fit, but it's pretty tight, and you can see the antenna for the electronic toll collection sitting up there, and it sort of takes up a bit of space too, so it makes the whole situation a little bit worse. Possibly I should have bent it a little bit more further up, but I was trying to avoid hitting that front cowling case. Finally got the original nuts for the axles here. Actually, I ended up having to order them twice because of a internet search issue that I had. So here are the ones that I first ordered, and I ended up ordering 3 of them. And I searched for my Cero, and I entered the number and used the search result to then click on the purchase link. And believe it or not, this search result that was returned wasn't the same number, and I missed noticing that. So I ended up ordering something which looked in the photo to be correct, but this is actually a 12mm nut, which is useless. And so, yeah, wasted money there. I have 3 of those to go with that. So I ended up reordering and doing a search, and I found it for a different bike, because obviously that part number wasn't coming up in the search result. And this is the one I got, and it looks like it's going to fit very nicely actually, so I'll get that on there in a minute. This is the nut, nice big flange nut. If you compare it, you'll see it's going to look quite a lot different on there, covering up all this ugly thread, and black as well, which is sort of nice. I think it'll look good. And while I'm finishing up this cowling here, I'll also give you a little hint as to how you can remove this cowl, and I ended up struggling on this for quite a while. So obviously on the cowl, you remove this top plate, which is just these 4 screws to remove the plastic plate, and then this plastic plate will remove. It probably slides up a little bit or something. The issue is actually getting the main light assembly off. Now there are these screws on either side here, which are obvious. You can just pop them out and that will allow it to move forward, but it doesn't come off. There's no like latching or sort of hook or anything that it sits on. There's actually 2 screws deep in the assembly. They're exactly the same type of screw as here, so you can use the same size hex wrench. You'll need a long hex wrench, and it goes back maybe about 10 centimeters from the front, but they're aligned with these holes. If you lift up all these cables and get them, you can sort of see them in there, but they're quite difficult to see. So if you can get a long wrench in there and put them on a slightly upward angle, you'll actually get in there. And right now I'm tightening it up, but yeah, so there's one on the left and the right. So these are the indicators that sort of tell you where they are, these round holes here. So use that as a reference, and you will save yourself a lot of hassle. There it is, all buttoned up. Got the rubber sheet on there, and you can see the antenna up there. Everything seems to fit quite nicely. Yeah, it looks pretty good, right? I think it worked out pretty well. I think the cover will go on there quite nicely. So this is a look at the final configuration. Everything's stacked in there quite nicely. And I've got the electronic toll collection unit in a little soft case. And the cables can run out there. So it means that I just need to pop it out to put the card in, but otherwise I'm not going to bother putting a bracket on because there's not really any space in there to do it, so I'll just have it sitting in there. And I've moved the tools to sit up the back there as well. They'll just sit there. I think they're not going to vibrate. I put a little bit of padding down to make sure they don't make any noise and bound them tightly. Unfortunately, the seat here, the pillion seat, has this original place to put the tools and lock in here, and this protrusion stops the seat from sitting down. So I'm going to chop that off, this protrusion off here, probably about at that line, and that should then be able to fit on there without any trouble. So I've got that all chopped off there. I've left these hooks in place, but I've taken down these ridges here, and I've left this edge here so that it can allow the electronic toll collection unit to rest up on here and not go forward into this latch mechanism. I also had to push it back a little bit further. I wasn't really sure about the position, so it's sitting quite far back now. And the computer connector I've just moved up here. It's just floating there now. And the tool's sitting there, so I think it all fits in there. And let's see if we can get this in. Look at that. Just like that, right? And one more final adjustment I had to make here. This seat, once I got it on, wouldn't fit. And it's because the airbox intake, which is down there, has like a shroud to stop water getting in it. And the seat also has a section here to stop water getting in it. And that means I can't mount anything in this area here. Otherwise it won't close because the shroud goes down in there. So I've just relocated the cables and the relay away from this bulkhead here. And it's all solved. So yeah, just want to make sure you have the right information anyway. That's the way it is. So I put that new linkage on that I got from Amazon, which was also available on AliExpress, the same thing, so I think it's just a Chinese vendor. It looks pretty good. Looks a lot better than that original one that was on there. The original one was just a piece of piano wire, basically, which is bent, and it was just sort of rattling around there. The fit was pretty rough, as you would expect from a piece of piano wire. So yeah, this is there's no play in that whatsoever, which is nice. So that's a nice little improvement. A little bit expensive though. I mean, I think this costs around about $15. I guess it's not that bad overall. I mean, some of the ones for some of the other bikes for like $50 or $60, so I think that's a pretty good investment to clean that up. So there you have it. It looks like it's all done, right? Got it all back together without too much trouble. I think we've knocked all of the ugliness out of it, and now it's looking pretty nice. I'll put the number plate on there later. Obviously I haven't put it on there right now for obvious reasons. You can see the handle arrangement's quite neat. And the indicators look pretty appropriate for this. And of course we've gotten rid of the ugly nuts and bolts and garbage everywhere. Yeah, so that's it. I hope it was helpful to somebody. But yeah, I'm pretty happy with that. So there you go.